The boy was chewing on the rarest red centipede in the world. Just a moment ago, as he had woken up, the scene was somewhat terrifying. His mother's face had become extremely frightening, with froth continuously bubbling from her mouth. No matter how much he called out, his mother would wake up. Next, his own body was in excruciating pain. They had been poisoned. A red centipede darted towards Jay Kang, and he, unable to resist, was bitten on the neck. The excruciating pain made him scream for help, but it was of no use. Seeing his mother bitten to death by the poisonous centipede, Jay Kang was determined to seek revenge. "You bit me, so I'll chew you," he said, as he bit the centipede's head. When his grandfather rushed over, he only saw Jay Kang unconscious, yet his mouth continued to chew on the red centipede. Immediately, his grandfather gave him precious medicine to counteract the poison. Suddenly, someone appeared. Mangio, a member of the Dokmun Phi. They were the ones who released the red centipede to harm Bach. The poison of the red centipede was the strongest among all centipedes, and no one could survive its venom. But Jay Kang managed to wake up shortly after. His body writhed in pain on the ground, which pleased his grandfather. Then, Jay Kang punched the centipede at the old man's leg, enraging him to the point of attempting to kill Jay Kang. Luckily, his grandfather used his body to block the centipede's poison. Though there was no antidote, the old man had to amputate his own leg to save himself. When they were distracted, Jay Kang and his grandfather disappeared without a trace. His grandfather exerted all his remaining strength to take him to a nearby cave, where he realized that his grandson had ingested the poison of the red centipede to resist its venom. Shortly after, he breathed his last breath and fell down. Before long, the Dokmun Phi people found Jay Kang. His grandfather's face turned cruel, wanting him to live worse than die for daring to make him crippled. When Jay Kang woke up, he found himself tied up like a pig on a table. They wanted to use him as an experiment with poison, making him live worse than die. A giant black centipede, super colossal, was released onto Jay Kang's body. He panicked and struggled, only to have his leg broken by the old man, leaving him only able to cry and wail. The next day, Jay Kang woke up again, and the old man gave him a recovery potion named Memory Enhancer, made from the finest ingredients. Its effect would prevent him from losing consciousness during the poison tests, so that this old dog could record his agonizing reactions. Additionally, he mixed in enough pufferfish toxin to kill 10 people. All Jay Kang could hear were his own desperate cries echoing in vain. Several weeks passed, during which Mangio continued his experiments. He started by administering simple poisons and gradually escalated to concocting various deadly compounds. Mangio experimented more and documented Jay Kang's reactions. It felt like descending into the deepest layers of hell. One day, the old man brought a venomous spider whose bite was incredibly potent. Immediately after being bitten, Jay Kang felt suffocated and begged for mercy, but the old man tightened his grip on Jay Kang's neck even more. This was the price to pay for making him amputate his own leg. In moments, Jay Kang's body went limp, teetering on the brink of life and death. However, the old dog persisted in saving him to continue his twisted experiments. Afterward, he left due to a summons from the Mirim Society. Upon his return, chaos reigned in the room, with animals everywhere, and Jay Kang was missing, his recently healed body likely unable to go far. The old man suspected Jay Kang might be hiding behind the wooden panel, but as soon as he opened it, he was struck by a bamboo spear. Suddenly, his body convulsed, blood spewing from his mouth incessantly. Mangio had never encountered such a poison. At that moment, Jay Kang emerged from the box where he had been hiding among poisonous snakes, surprising the old man. From the start, he had deceived him, allowing the poison to attack him. The blood used to create the poison was extracted from Jay Kang. Finally, Jay Kang managed to escape. He's too kind-hearted. If he were to fight that old man again, he will probably admit defeat. Jay Kang decided to seek out the Mirim Society to seek revenge for Bach. They were the most powerful force, specializing in resolving all matters, ensuring justice and wielding authority. Bach was the head of the Mirim Society. Inside the headquarters, Jay Kang sneaked in to meet him and report the treachery of Dokmun Phi against Bach, only to discover that Bach was the mastermind behind supporting Dokmun Phi. He pulled the strings for Dokmun Phi's power, and even ordered the extermination of all members of Bach to eliminate future threats. Upon learning this, Jay Kang knew he had to survive to seek vengeance for his family. He overheard that Jay Kang had gone to the southern gate and found members of Bach being forced into the mines for slavery. He infiltrated the area to escape with them. King recounted his tragic situation to them, offering to help them escape using the poison from his fingers. This was the result of being forced by Mangio to ingest 5,000 poisonous centipedes, among other toxins, during his experiments. They were astonished by this revelation. A martial artist among them used his skills to check Kang's meridians. All his meridians were blocked as if they were punctured, and even his acupuncture points. There seemed to be a network connecting them all, gathering toxins within the meridians, which was highly abnormal. One of them voiced opposition to this plan, fearing death. However, Kang boldly stated that they might not survive long as slaves in the mines. Better to die with honor than to live in shame. Eventually, they all agreed to join him in action. Just then, their pursuers announced they must return immediately, as Mangio had awakened and was raging, searching everywhere. Fortunately, they didn't know Kang's appearance. Otherwise, it would have been a disaster. They counted the people on the carriage, realizing there was one extra person. The leader's face turned menacing, threatening to kill them all if they didn't surrender the extra person. A coward among them revealed the truth. Kang was the one they were after. They seized him, demanding the others be allowed to live. Before he could finish his sentence, he was cleaved into two by the bald-headed youth. People, seeing this, were outraged and cursed him as a demon, a vile dog. They immediately rushed forward to confront them. Despite their internal injuries from the poisoning, they wielded stones as weapons. Though they only caused minor scratches, the bald-headed youth immediately suffered internal bleeding and died in agony. The bald youth also realized the stone contained poison. If they didn't engage in close combat, he wouldn't fear. He skillfully used his sword technique, slashing them into two, horrifying everyone. When did Kang get behind him? He swung a stone filled with poison towards Kang, but his attack was too weak to affect him. Immediately, he thrust his sword towards Kang, sneering at the attempt to ambush him. He underestimated me too much. Were they all going to die here? Soon after, many members of Bach rushed to attack him, but they were no match. They were quickly slaughtered, leaving only one survivor behind. Meanwhile, Kang slowly stood up, having counted to 10 since earlier. At this moment, his opponent's mouth wouldn't stop bleeding due to the poisoning, though he didn't know how he got poisoned. It turned out, during the stabbing, Kang had smeared poison on his own hand onto the opponent's sword. The opponent kept slashing and then licking the sword, sealing his fate. He collapsed from exhaustion. Foimo then approached, seeking revenge for those slaughtered by him. He begged for mercy, but Foimo bid him farewell forever. Both rode away. When Kang woke up, it was also when the elder fell off his horse, unable to endure any longer. He hoped Kang could continue to survive and seek revenge for all of Bach. When the Marim Society members discovered the area, it was covered in corpses. But one person had managed to escape, enraging them. They were determined to catch him at all costs. After a week of fleeing, Kang managed to escape from Dokman Phi, and miraculously, his wounds began to heal. Perhaps it was due to the insane experiments he endured before. He reached a nearby town and learned that Bach and other sects had been enslaved by Dokman Phi to work in the mines. Immediately, he set off to rescue them. After careful consideration, Kang realized it was a trap. However, if he didn't go, no one else could save them. As predicted, Dokman Phi used this rumor as bait to capture him. Mangio had also recovered, albeit partially blind from Kang's poison. He was determined to capture Kang for revenge. At the same time, Kang reached the mining area and saw the enslaved people, including his grandfather, forced to work there. He was even more determined to rescue them. But the place was heavily guarded. Kang caused a warehouse fire to create chaos and infiltrate the mines. Everyone was shocked to see him there, thinking he was the only one capable of escaping. However, Kang declared he would save them all. The old blind man realized the warehouse fire was intentional and suspected Kang's involvement. He thought it possible that Kang had sneaked into the mines. Indeed, Kang's appearance brought joy to his face, but he also realized he couldn't let Kang die easily. He would wait for the opportune moment to crush him. The old man happily informed the superintendent that Kang had been caught, but his expression remained unchanged. He knew these people had been destined to be buried alive there. This infuriated Mangio. but he couldn't defy the superintendent's orders. Suddenly, an explosion shook the entrance of the mine, causing rocks and debris to block it completely. Everyone felt hopeless, realizing they couldn't escape. This sight was particularly bitter for Mangio. He knelt down, crying bitterly. He had missed his chance to kill Jin Cha Gang with his own hands. Jin Cha Gang realized at this point that everything was caused by the Grand Marshal of the Marim Alliance, prompting them to kill to suppress the chaos. Now they couldn't help them as the entrance had been blocked. However, they still had enough strength and tools. If they worked together, they might be able to escape. Jin Cha Gang's grandfather also agreed with his opinion. They couldn't just sit and wait to die here. Although it wasn't easy, digging a passage without food or light was incredibly difficult. People were gradually becoming exhausted. Jin Cha Gang discovered a small water pond here, which could help everyone regain strength. However, upon tasting it, he found that the water was poisoned. Nevertheless, Jin Cha Gang didn't give up on digging the tunnel diligently. However, all his efforts were in vain as the tunnel collapsed once again, burying many people. They had stopped trying since they couldn't rebuild the tunnel, and there was also little food and water left. Everyone was immersed in despair and crying except for Jin Cha Gang, who continued to dig tirelessly. Jin Cha Gang's grandfather decided to pass on his martial arts techniques to him, as this was his final plea. Subsequently, members of other factions also wanted to pass on their best techniques to him. This angered Jin Cha Gang's grandfather, who believed that they were imposing too much burden on him. However, Jin Cha Gang stood up and declared with determination that he was no longer just living for himself. He had to avenge everyone. Despite the heavy burden, he would survive and let those perpetrators know the hell they had put them through. With everyone's guidance, Jin Cha Gang quickly mastered the martial arts techniques of each faction, demonstrating his exceptional talent. Truly, destiny was full of wonders, and even without rest, Jin Cha Gang could unleash its full power. A few days later, Jin Cha Gang's grandfather reached his limit and passed away, leaving behind the mournful sentiments of everyone. Jin Cha Gang was also deeply saddened by this, but he didn't let it discourage him. He had to continue training. Time was running out. 2 weeks passed, and inside the mine, only Jin Cha Gang survived. He witnessed each person leave and carried their responsibilities on his shoulders, seeking vengeance. Outside the mine, old Mangio, addicted to his perverse pleasure of alcohol, suddenly noticed some wine on the ground, and in a fit of frenzy, he burst into laughter. Surely, Jin Cha Gang was still alive. Inside the mine, Jin Cha Gang was the only one left alive. He had seen each person leave, carrying their responsibilities, vowing to repay blood with blood. After filling his stomach with grass and water, Jin Cha Gang dedicated time to training, enduring day after day, month after month. 8 years later, Jin Cha Gang finally dug through the mountain and escaped the mine. At the same time, Doc Mumfet continued to rampage, destroying other factions, aiming to steal their secrets. After Mangio left, Doc Mumfet was expelled from the Marim Alliance. He searched frantically but found no trace of his whereabouts. That night, he woke up to find his body covered in toxic blisters, rushing outside for help, only to find all his men dead from poisoning. He quickly realized that these symptoms were caused by Chuseor. He then called for someone to bring fake medicine, but realized in the haze of smoke that someone was burning their headquarters. It was none other than Jin Cha Gang. With only a few doses of antidote left, the leaders selfishly kept them for themselves. Then they pursued Jin Cha Gang through the poisonous fog in the forest. Jin Cha Gang emerged from the darkness, and seeing he was alone, they laughed, thinking him delusional. But then, they tried to attack him with hot weapons, only to miss, while he easily subdued them one by one. Even if they ganged up on him, they couldn't harm Jin Cha Gang. The elder of the sect, observing Jin Cha Gang's movements, noted they were stiff and awkward, clearly indicating his lack of combat experience. Yet, why was this greenhorn so confident? It was because he possessed the deadliest poison. With just one shot, he struck down a man, who immediately cried out in agony. Finally, the old leader had to reveal his hand, but still couldn't land a hit. Jin Cha Gang fell to the ground, laughing heartily. It was then that the elder realized his body was numb, poisoned by Chusa, slowly paralyzing his senses and rendering them useless. Did they think the poison was neutralized? But when they arrived, Jin Cha Gang had burnt green tea leaves, a taboo during detoxification. If the antidote was mixed with green tea, it would be rendered ineffective. Since then, Jin Cha Gang had just been biding his time, waiting for their poison to take effect. These fools considered him a mere straw man. In the 8 years, Jin Cha Gang had always thought about this moment. Of course, the plan couldn't go wrong. It was only now that the elder begged for mercy, promising to help Jin Cha Gang take revenge on those who had ordered his death. But it was futile, as Jin Cha Gang's body was immune to all types of poison, and there was no antidote for them. Before he died, Jin Cha Gang also revealed his true identity. Someone who could survive in the mine without food or drink for 8 years. A feat deemed impossible. After dealing with all the members of the Confronting sect, Jin Cha Gang went through their records to trace those responsible for the destruction of the Confronting sect. They were none other than the Triple Alliance, the most poisonous sect, led by the general of the Mirim Alliance, Luk Long Kimin. Li Zhongbake had summoned Mangio after receiving intriguing information from Unem. His sect had been annihilated in a single night, and even the Alliance couldn't find any clues. The old man laughed gleefully because he knew Jin Cha Gang was the culprit. But the general didn't believe that a kid could survive in the mine for 8 years. He would become hungry and desperate, and he would eventually slaughter them all. Perhaps he was seeking his next prey, which would make him stronger. Other poisonous sects were becoming like the Confronting sect. The general had ordered a card to investigate this matter, and the old man was eager to witness the fruits of the hatred he had sown over the past decade. Confronting was nothing to him now. Hatred was one of the strongest motivators, especially for someone who had struggled in hellish conditions for nearly a decade. When Mangio arrived at Confronting, the elder's lair had been completely burned down. Suddenly, a short sword flew in, narrowly missing the old man's head, reminding him to count the number of visitors, none other than the deadliest poison sects from Unem. They were curious about someone who had stolen countless forbidden poisons from their sects to run to the Alliance, only to return now. While they wanted to execute the elder, his status as an investigator for the Alliance made it nearly impossible for anyone to act against him. Mangio quickly understood the situation. There was a medical method involving burning a small amount of chusa and controlling the dosage, which could treat skin ailments known as examination of poisonous herbs. However, if the dosage of chusa exceeded the safe limit, it would become a deadly poison. The culprit had used this method, and there were also green tea leaves present, indicating that the enemy had prepared both a detoxification method and a suppressive technique. Naturally, a sect specializing in poisons wouldn't have an enemy. The old man trembled with excitement, as the perpetrator was undoubtedly Jin Cha Gang, his disciple. The next target was other poisonous sects. Suddenly, pouches of poisonous smoke were thrown at the members of the sect, causing them to feel suffocated. A figure emerged from the smoke, a vengeance seeker, Jin Cha Gang. He moved effortlessly in the darkness, spreading toxic cries. With his body immune to all poisons, Jin Cha Gang easily pushed back the elder, whose aura couldn't affect him. Jin Cha Gang used his two-finger grappling technique, followed by returning the elder's attacks. A disciple was instantly subdued, and the elder's body was paralyzed after coming into contact with Jin Cha Gang's poisonous hands. When the elder's aura directly struck his shoulder, his body was paralyzed, collapsing to the ground. The old man couldn't believe it. A mere kid had defeated him, using poison punches directly to his legs, to no effect. Surprised, the old man wondered what he had been foolishly playing at. Eventually, he died from his own poison. The other two poisonous sects, upon hearing that the Itin sect had been attacked, became vigilant. Mangio then went to Confronting, telling them to prepare for their demise. On Jin Cha Gang's side, members of the Martial Arts Alliance approached him, but they were easily subdued because they dared to rush into the poisonous smoke, using the surviving members as shields before attacking from a dead angle. One of them seemed adept at evading our army's weapons. I heard he had defeated Mangio, so I thought he must be a master, but I was mistaken. He recklessly charged into the smoke, thinking he could strike Jin Cha Gang, but it turned out to be just the corpse of the elder, whom Jin Cha Gang had used as a shield before swiftly dispatching his opponent. However, this opponent wasn't easy to handle either. Meanwhile, Mangio demonstrated his strength by swiftly eliminating members of Confronting, leaving their leader in shock. He hadn't expected the elder to conceal himself so well, but the elder's intention was to lighten Jin Cha Gang's burden so he could mature more easily. The leader of Confronting fought back with all his might but was no match for Mangio, and was swiftly defeated. At that moment, Jin Cha Gang was still battling the assassin from the Alliance. Only now was he truly engaged in combat, with his speed increasing dramatically, shocking his opponent. Jin Cha Gang was concealing his true power until now, and his speed wasn't faster. It was his opponent who had slowed down due to the wound from the parasol before. The poison was rapidly spreading in his body, and only now did he realize Jay Kang was a dangerous adversary, prompting him to use all his strength to quickly resolve the situation. However, the poison in his body was stronger, and he thought he had pierced Jay Kang. But he could still speak. The situation seemed to be coming to an end when Jay Kang suddenly sensed a tremendous killing intent from afar, emanating from Mangio. He wanted Jay Kang to rest because there was still a long journey ahead, and pushing too hard would only harm him. Mangio wanted to witness Jay Kang's growth before targeting the 3 strongest sects in Unem, so he decided to lend a hand. Mangio arrived at the headquarters of Dak Duojiaman. When the headmaster, Wijong, saw him, he was filled with anger, because Mangio was the one who betrayed the League of Doduokman to follow the martial arts alliance. Wijong released a powerful poison that spread throughout the area, but it had no effect on Mangio. It seemed that Wijong still believed he was the leader of the 3-tiered sect and could intimidate Mangio. However, Mangio wasn't there to start a fight. He was the one who brought news of the death of Headmaster Nam Gido and also delivered orders in the guise of a martial arts alliance investigator. Mangio pinned all the blame for the destruction of Dak Manfai on the perpetrator, making all the factions under Dak Duojiaman his targets. Although his intentions weren't clear at first, after tracking him, it seemed plausible to guess where he was headed. He was on his way to the headquarters of the Theatin sect. By advancing through the celestial net, he could definitely catch him. This would require a very large force. If we mobilize such a force just to catch a murderer, outsiders will judge us harshly. This is exactly what the headmaster had in mind, and it was all part of Mangio's plan. Before leaving, he also mentioned that the culprit could very well be the members, outsiders. Dak Duojiaman would be distracted towards the Theatin sect, while Jay Kang would definitely choose to attack Hackam. As a result, the headmaster of Dak Duojiaman issued orders for the entire sect, urging 20 of the most elite warriors to hunt down the culprit heading for the Theatin sect. They would have to be vigilant, especially against the Kwe members. Meanwhile, Jay Kang had reached the headquarters of Hackam. Outwardly, they appeared to be ordinary farmers, but their movements showed no wasted motion. There were about 30 of them. If they rushed in blindly, it would be like walking into a death trap. Jay Kang cautiously considered his options. Farmers would use kumach to make rice cakes for everyone. Poison could only be administered through rice cakes. Having used up most of the mercury poison from his body in the previous battle, and also nearly exhausted the poisonous substance from the poisonous sect, he needed to find a way to stock up more. Jay Kang discovered a large number of Kianguho flowers here, the seeds of which could detoxify the body through excretion. However, overdosing would lead to diarrhea and hallucinations, and even death. If he could accumulate a large amount of poison, the 30 people here wouldn't be a problem. Jay Kang directly consumed them. A few days later, a person washing kumach by the stream was dealt with by him. When the dark omen was known, the sect immediately warned everyone to retreat to the mountains to hunt him down. Even their sect's headmaster had to question it, thinking it was just a misunderstanding. Quickly, they found Jay Kang trying to poison the well, surrounded with no way out. Someone wondered why they found him, suspecting it was his plan to lure them into an ambush. It was not good at all. Before he died, they wanted to ask him about killing the faction leaders and nearby villagers. Jay Kang had no idea about those villagers. It was Mangio who did it all. Jay Kang immediately released his dark aura, but was blocked and then overwhelmed by Mangio's incredible strength, quickly captured and immobilized. Then he was locked up, scheduled for interrogation by Dak Duojiaman the next day. After finishing this, they all calmly ate and drank. One of them brought rice cakes in front of him. They had a tradition of making rice cakes during the harvest season. At the beginning of the year, the leader had ordered one for Jay Kang, as if he were his brother who had just been killed by him. So, there would be no escape for him. He ate it, then was beaten as revenge for the sworn brother. However, Jay Kang could still move, surprising them. The acupuncture tricks didn't work on someone with unopened acupuncture points like him. It was about time. Suddenly, he was in extreme pain from being poisoned, screaming in agony. Everyone who ate the rice cakes couldn't survive, including the headmaster of Hackam. It turns out that from the beginning, he pretended to be captured to catch them off guard. Later, he ate the poisoned rice cakes that he had prepared beforehand, catching them off guard. Even poisoning the water source was just a distraction. He secretly added a shelf of wheat there to poison them. Gang revealed his identity and the identities of his medical sects before leaving. Instead of killing the headmaster, he burned down the entire house. The headmaster's body couldn't move due to the poison. He could only beg for mercy, but it was a farewell. He tried to escape, but his final attempt to attack Gang failed. Even though he was poisoned by the glorious seed, he remained strong, showing why he was the leader of the Hackam sect. The headmaster crazily attacked Gang, despite being affected by the toxic aura, which resulted in the death of his disciple. Gang dealt with him from behind. This was the price he had to pay. When nearby villagers discovered it, the fire couldn't be extinguished. Naturally, all members of Hackam were wiped out in just one night. At this moment, Gang was stockpiling various poisons to prepare for the upcoming battles. The venom of the divine snake, if ingested, would immediately paralyze the body, stop the heart, and lead to death. It was one of the deadly poisons, for which even experts had no antidote, and it laid the foundation for the creation of Doc Manhwa today. He personally brewed a bottle, experiencing excruciating pain that spread from his stomach to his heart. It would be his secret weapon. When Gang woke up, there were countless corpses of ordinary people outside. This was reminiscent of what the former headmaster had said before. Later, Gang heard the villagers' cries when he arrived at the scene. All the people had been brutally murdered, their bodies piled up. He felt no presence, but the bodies were still warm. The murderer had just passed through. Moreover, he must be a master. Gang couldn't understand why he wanted to take all the blame upon himself. If he knew who was behind this, he would surely die without a doubt. At the same time, at Kikokulonman, the old and ailing Mangio was washing away the bloodstains on his body. The headmaster, seeing this scene, was also horrified. He exclaimed that they had encountered a murderer who had massacred the Doc Manhwa lineage, and that Mangio had come here with ambitions to ruin his disciples at Kikokulonman. They were tidying up the chaos left behind by the destroyed Doc Manhwa members when they managed to capture Gang, the eldest son of the headmaster, who had left behind his pregnant wife. They couldn't know the intentions of the wicked old man, whether he was targeting loved ones like them or not. They quickly confronted him, and he immediately introduced himself as Sejin Chu, the deputy head of Fei Luong, stating he was here to investigate an incident that seemed like a nearby murderer. He asked if Gang could show his identification, but Gang naturally refused. Then, he called for his henchmen to bring Mangio there to confirm. However, Gang didn't have time for that. He directly left. One of them attempted to attack Gang, but seeing the murderous aura emanating from him, they began to use their techniques. The group immediately confirmed him as the murderer. They rushed to attack Gang, but he quickly threw his poison pouches, incapacitating them all in an instant. Even when the deputy head rushed in, he couldn't do anything. Gang slammed him to the ground with his hands, and they had no idea they had been poisoned. The bombs he used contained a mixture of deadly Fang Hokok toxins, potent enough to cause excruciating pain upon inhalation, but not lethal if the poison was expelled from the body. He warned them not to follow him anymore. Despite their pleas, he spared their lives. However, these individuals wouldn't get off so easily. He would ensure justice was served. As for their martial arts alliance, it no longer existed. They should reconsider their organization before interrogating others. That afternoon, Mangio arrived, feeding poison to his nephew with his own hands, and falsely accusing the murderer of doing so, leaving amidst the anguish of his nephew and his pregnant wife. When they saw his lifeless body, everyone was stricken with silent pain, including those present who were also murdered by the wicked old man. Head of the Keluong sect was in agony, crying before the death of his son, blaming everything on Mangio for deceiving him. But this old man's act was too convincing, with tears and snot flowing. He even called Sejinchu his son. Watching this, one could only want to punch the old man in the face a few times to ease the bitterness. At the same time, news of the destruction of Hackam had reached the Doc Hackam sect. The old man was furious at being hurt by Mangio's trickery. Even if the culprit mobilized all his forces, the Gusong sect should have been there. Gusong wasn't easy to defeat like that. However, he still perished. Perhaps I should have listened to Mangio's suggestion to besiege and capture them. Immediately, he ordered the gathering of all affiliated families of Unum. An urgent meeting was convened. Under the summons, the head of the Thetan sect, Jukang, was present. They went to a nearby town to rest. He was careful to check the food before eating, for fear of being poisoned. Cha Gang was also present. He ate a few bowls but couldn't pay the bill, so he was caught here to pay off his debts gradually. Truong Phai Thiet doubted Cha Gang's identity. He emitted a terrifying aura to threaten Cha Gang, who remained unmoved. After confirming that he had no martial arts skills, he left. The next morning, they had breakfast before setting off. Before eating, the head of the sect cautiously tasted the poison and then ate. He did not know the eyes of death were staring at him. This would be the last meal for all of them. Quickly, a disciple of the Phai Thiet sect felt stomach pain. Initially, they thought it was due to eating too hastily, but then they began to vomit blood continuously. Everyone was poisoned, except the head of the sect, who had not faced him. It was Cha Gang who had poisoned their utensils. The toxin used was tamtich poison from the Hackam sect. It would liquefy the intestines and cause death by hemorrhage over time. Before he could finish his sentence, he was attacked from a distance by the old man, whose attack was like a gunshot, extremely powerful and devastating. However, it was only like a fish flopping in a pan. Cha Gang quickly activated the poison in the old man's body, incapacitating him. Before leaving, he was told about the event of the medical sect's destruction. It was unavoidable. Without fire, how could there be smoke? Everything had its reasons. He would soon turn into a monster, uncontrollable, fueled by rage and hatred. This anger and hatred were the driving forces that helped him survive and move forward. Meanwhile, the wife of the deputy sect leader of Kiluwang-do sect was in shock. They had lost their child, and now their grandson couldn't be saved either. At this moment, their sect leader seemed to have gone mad. Losing their son and now their grandson, and being mocked by their own brother, everything was blamed on the Dokduokra sect. If they had listened to the old man, they could have used their heavenly nets and traps to capture the culprit early on. Their son wouldn't have died, and their unfortunate nephew wouldn't have fallen victim either. They had no idea how cunning their brother was. He was the one behind all this tragedy. At the same time, the head of the Dokduokra sect was carefully considering the situation. Of the 4 major poisonous sects under their jurisdiction in Unam, only the Dokduokra sect remained. The biggest threat now was a very small disturbance. All because of their own mistake, their lack of prudent action. However, the head of the Kelluang sect had incited the smaller sects to rebel. Although the death of their son was not related to them, they were making a fuss about justice. In reality, they were just despicable creatures seeking advantage while the poisonous sects were weakened. They would not easily overthrow the Dokduokra sect. He had used money from the Martial Arts Alliance to support the Dokduokra in Unam, thus becoming the king of Unam. And now, Cha Gang had infiltrated here under the guise of a helper. They had to complete the task quickly before the rainy season. It would rain continuously in this area for the next month. That evening, a few helpers invited him to drink together. At first, he hesitated, but then he joked that it would take 10 bottles of this wine to get him drunk. In the end, they were all drunk, except for Cha Gang. He escorted them home, and they kindly invited him to stay instead of sleeping outside. His wife even prepared water for him to bathe and clothes for him. It was the first time in 8 years that he felt this way. People were still inherently good, weren't they? The next day, dressed in his new attire, Cha Gang looked entirely different, albeit just casually so. They had breakfast together, and the host also had a son. However, the boy had died 5 years ago due to illness, and since then, the house had become unusually quiet. He and his wife didn't talk much anymore. They couldn't make everything return to how it used to be, but it had been a long time since he had seen her cook breakfast with such enthusiasm as today. It felt like their son had truly returned. The host also agreed to let him stay as long as he wanted. This reminded him of the happy days with his parents. But now those days were gone. He couldn't live a peaceful life anymore. As he closed his eyes, he thought of the Bach Valley of the Laimon sect, and when he shut himself in, he heard their lamentations. No matter how tightly he shut his nose, he still smelled the scent of death and blood on his hands. He couldn't wash it away. Every day, he felt his blood seeping into the tiles as he repaired the house. A few days later, the meeting of the Unam branch of the Dokmunfai sect was held. Many large and small sects gathered here. Our poisonous bloc was facing its biggest obstacle since its establishment in this land. 3 sects within the bloc had been wiped out by a mysterious entity, and outside forces were taking advantage of this situation. They wanted to seize our influence in this area. Although Annam had not been heavily affected yet due to its considerable distance from Zhongyuan, if the situation continued, the poisonous bloc would not be able to withstand this influence. Therefore, we had to tighten our alliance within the bloc and prepare thoroughly to be ready for any upcoming dangers. We were here to discuss the distribution of assets, since both major poisonous sects have been eliminated. An old man, representing everyone, stood in for the Dakguojiaomon sect. There were rumors that the culprit responsible for the annihilation of the Dakmunfai sects was none other than the Dakguojiaomon sect. Hence, we needed to prioritize investigating the Dakduhamon sect as the main suspect. Bringing 3 corpses collected from the annihilated Dakmunfai sects, including Yukno, the elder leader of the Dakduojiaomon sect. We aimed to dispel any rumors that their sect was irresponsible for this matter. This was orchestrated by the old man to quell all rumors. Earlier, the Sale sect was promised a reward, as they would receive a portion of the business from the Hackam sect. They also couldn't use the power of the martial arts alliance to hunt him down, because that would be like leading a wolf back home. The peaceful situation in Dakduojiaomon left the old Mangio puzzled. Shortly after, he picked up a piece of tile and licked it like a madman, then burst into loud laughter. It was the poison of Linixa. He must have laced it with poison, stolen from Hackam into the tiles. All it took was a heavy rain, and this place would turn into hell. However, if it didn't rain, all the preparations he had painstakingly made would go to waste, just to add more drama. The old man then sent a message to the head of Dakduojiaomon, saying that the murderer was here, making everyone alert. The head immediately ordered everyone to gather in the conference hall. He wanted to celebrate what they had done with alcohol. This was not a normal situation, causing fear in everyone, yet the alcohol turned out to be harmless and even delicious. He also acknowledged that to drink that cup of wine, one had to go to where Weijong was standing. By forcing each person to take about 20 steps, they would be able to tell who was a coward or not. In fact, it was a trap. No matter how one pretended, they couldn't fool the countless eyes of the others. He went straight up to the old man and revealed his true identity and reason for being here. Of course, to set them up. The old man immediately burst into laughter, saying, "You sure know how to play your part." Some of his disciples immediately attacked him, but the old man himself also confronted him. He used Kin Kujonki to attack. Balls made of acid flew towards him, but Jeking cleverly used the body of an enemy to block the blows. Then he counterattacked, but his whole body was thrown back. However, the old man's hand was also pierced with poison, which kept spreading under the group's collective attack. He was quickly subdued, which made the head of the faction feel very strange. Such a weak person couldn't do such things. He yelled frantically, demanding to know who was behind him. He then crazily unleashed his poison, but still couldn't get Jeking to talk. Outside, a fully armed group had gathered. They were the rebellious faction, led by the head, Fakir Wang. They had come here to demand justice for Annam. He had hired skilled assassins to destroy the 3 Dakmunfai factions and create a pretext to gather all the Dakmunfai in Annam. It was he who had killed my son. This can be investigated if he handed over the culprit. Of course, the head of the faction refused to do so. He continued to laugh, refusing to speak no matter what. We were curious about his true identity, laying the blame on the righteous factions that had always used Jeking to advance here. The righteous factions, fools, attempted to confront the Dakmunfai Valley. After today, they would cease to exist, and we would show them the true power of the Dakmunfai Valley, a faction that had held sway over Annam for so long, starting with him. The righteous factions couldn't afford to let him be eliminated. Jeking thought he would die here while his opponent was still unannounced. Suddenly, it started raining, and he used his poison to blind one of the head's eyes, causing him to scream in agony. It turned out he had concealed poison in his mouth all along, hence his refusal to speak until now. The righteous factions surged forward in response, and chaos ensued. Jeking immediately shouted, reminding them not to forget Leikaha. "I am Jin Cha Gang of Bach Homan Fei. I am here to avenge the slaughter of Bach Homan by you." His furious cry, filled with years of pent-up hatred, struck fear into all present. No one would survive this onslaught. Meanwhile, Mangio was enjoying the grand spectacle he had orchestrated. Jeking, exuding terrifying murderous intent, threatened the members of the righteous factions, warning them not to advance, lest they face dire consequences. This was their chance to defeat the Dokman-Phi Alliance. Their greed would make them pay the price. The members of Dokman focused their attacks on him, but Gypsy fought back like the angel of death, striking down one after another. At this point, they had no dignity left. Mangio went berserk, attacking him relentlessly. The headmaster, Wijong, realized that something was amiss. Even in the face of death, he showed no fear and seemed to be plotting something. Just then, the rainwater had flooded the area, and he finally understood what was happening. He shouted for everyone to run, but it was too late. They had all been poisoned by the Satlin Hexadop poison, and many of them quickly perished. Wijong also realized that this was a massive trap set by Gypsy. His body began to itch uncontrollably due to the effects of the Bakwa shell, and he couldn't stop scratching until he bled. Now, only Wijong, the headmaster, remained alive. It must be said that I acknowledge your prowess. You have completely obliterated the 4 largest Dokman-Phi factions and the entire alliance of Unam. Although I find it hard to believe even witnessing it firsthand, as long as I am alive, the Dokdualkeamon faction will endure forever. Wijong attacked Gypsy with lightning speed. He used the Dade-Yukin technique, unleashing countless tiny poisonous fragments towards Gypsy. This was the Date-Tamdok, a lethal poison that destroyed internal organs, before launching various other poisons at him. Gypsy's body couldn't withstand the assault and collapsed unconscious. While he was about to kill him, Mangio appeared with a thunderous sound, sending the old man flying. Slowly, the old man approached and revealed the truth. He himself was the mastermind behind all the chaos here. The reason was simple: revenge. What does Gypsy have to do with Tao? I am the monster that he created. My life is filled with resentment and hatred towards him. I have survived until now, solely for the purpose of seeking revenge against him. Yet you crossed my path, not just once, but twice. Does this old man even know what he's doing? Hallucinating with disordered language alongside Mangio? And there's also a mysterious figure dressed in black. Wijong immediately demanded that she reveal her identity, certain that she was not from Unam. She unleashed tremendous power, neutralizing the old man's poison, clearly from the Sikwon region. Then, Mangio revealed that she was a traitor to her homeland, his younger sister. At this point, she rushed forward and questioned everything. The old man no longer hid anything, confessing that he was the one who killed his son. This revelation left him unable to believe his own eyes and ears, crazily crying out in anguish. It turns out that everything was orchestrated by his older brother, who wanted immediate revenge and was subsequently killed. All the members of the righteous faction rushed forward, attacking him. But they were no match for the two of them. Then, she approached Gypsy again, expressing a desire to have a conversation and share a drink with them about everything that had happened over the past 8 years, albeit sadly acknowledging it couldn't happen. Next, she thrust a large stab into Gypsy's head. Your revenge is not yet complete, and for you to accomplish it, you must become stronger. She then unblocked Gypsy's meridians, forcibly pushed energy into him, and opened the blocked meridians that had been sealed for 8 years. This was the gift she gave to Gypsy, urging him to become stronger and rise to the pinnacle of the martial world. For then, she would be the one to send Gypsy to hell. So don't die until that day. On that day, the day when the fierce rain poured down, not a single person survived at the Dokman-Phi conference. The death of Wijong, the foremost master of the Unam region, along with many other masters of the poison faction and martial artists from various righteous sects, created a tumultuous scene at the lake. Gypsy, once renowned, had Mangio returned to her original identity in the Mirim faction, but was not punished for the catastrophe in Unam. Instead, she was commended. However, doubts began to arise among the generals. They suspected his involvement in this incident along with others. A few days later, Gypsy woke up in a place even stranger than before. His wounds had been carefully bandaged by Lao Jiang, who thought Gypsy had been lucky to wake up after sleeping for 4 days. When he arrived at the Dokman-Phi conference, a horrifying scene awaited him. Corpses scattered everywhere, with only Gypsy barely breathing. Lao Jiang, kind-hearted as he was, took Gypsy back and cared for him like his own son. But Gypsy quickly realized that Lao Jiang had been poisoned. It was a symptom of a type of poison from horse dung, or their excretions, causing terrifying infections and ultimately infiltrating the victim's organs to kill them. Surely, Lao Jiang had brought him back in a state of poisoning with countless toxins in his body. Jie King made a promise to himself that he would save Lao Jiang, no matter the cost, not letting the pain from past mistakes resurface. Now, he was different from the helpless human he once was. He had burned everything in his home, and might have been infected with his own poison. The only thing he needed now was a method to decode the poison. And the most important thing he needed to find was the two Kim Duke. He couldn't cure the poison without it. He needed to find high-quality pills from a reputable medical clinic. But when he arrived, he sensed an aura emanating from them. They seemed to be members of the Martial Alliance investigating this matter. Suddenly, Jie King felt pain again, as if something was moving inside his body. His internal force began to act violently, beyond his control. The people, noticing his strange behavior, began to suspect and wanted him to go with them on a trip. However, Jie King couldn't move. Amidst the most dangerous moment, a girl suddenly intercepted their swords. She was also looking for him. Then with ease, she dealt with two guards. He also realized that she was a master. He could only follow her if he didn't want to die. They talked together. He explained that he was not the one who caused the tragedy at Dokmenfai. At least at that time, he had been knocked unconscious. The underworld had given him the name Hun Dokwoong. She came from Hakfai. They would both be implicated in that catastrophe. There were two ways to resolve it. They could apprehend the murderer to turn rumors into truth, or ensure they were not blamed for any further incidents. She also told him a story. Once there was a famous man across Kango. Because of his heroic will and his frequent assistance to others, many admired him. No one suspected him, not even a naive young girl who accepted his affection, believing he would make her happy. However, he didn't love her at all. It was all for the Matki book her family owned. After obtaining it, he abandoned her and even told others that her family was part of the demonic faction, leading to their slaughter. Yet he was still considered upright because he could abandon his prince for his knightly spirit. He simply called for his execution. He didn't know that the girl before him was the tragic heroine of that story. Her name was Dan Ryung-kyung in Kangho. They called her the servant of justice and righteousness. He had heard of that name before in an eastern faction, where there was a lord with unbeatable power, an outstanding female general, and the mother of minor factions. She said she would teach him martial arts and provide the necessary resources for strength so that he could seek revenge, and she could achieve her goal. She wanted to make the enemy of her enemy her friend. However, he refused this offer, meaning he would confront her. He used toxins around his body, attempting to strike her with poisoned needles, but she easily blocked him, and then struck him down directly. Jie King intended to use a poisoned knife for a sneak attack, but everything seemed futile. Even before that knife could touch my throat, his head exploded like fireworks. However, he remained calm because many people had been drawn here by her status and fame. Surely he couldn't act rashly. However, just with a word from her, they all quickly left. Illusions, really. Even if he cooperated with the factions, only to be used as bait, he wouldn't lose anything. Together, they could eliminate the common enemy, and he would gain more strength. Then she would provide him with two Kim Duke to save Lao Jiang. So in the end, Jie King agreed to cooperate. Next, she taught him Nadong Che, which was quite simple to memorize. The last thing she wanted to say was about information. It seemed that others had ventured to Lao Jiang's house. At this moment, he was in danger, facing a famous figure in Kangho, and one of Tam Long and Tu Dai Triu, Jie Galian. He would have to prepare himself, because they were much stronger than the Dokman Fai he'd encountered before. She did this only to repay a favor. Later, he would have to spare someone at her request. When he returned home, Lao Jiang had been taken away. On the table, there was a note indicating the location of the hostage. He quickly went there. They wanted to use Lao Jiang to threaten him. Jie King had to tell the truth. He was the successor of Bach Homan, and he had only defended the four great factions, the ones responsible for the destruction of the martial arts schools. However, they didn't believe him. They forced him to return to the martial arts union to tell everything. This was akin to seeking death when their leader was the one behind it all, shielding Dokmenfai in Unam. Jie King immediately released a terrifying aura, enveloping them all. This was the aura of murderous intent, which could be sensed. It was the desire to kill. Even ordinary people who didn't use internal energy could reveal this type of aura when consumed by extreme anger. The aura of murderous intent was the most terrifying, making them feel a chilling sensation throughout their bodies. How could he emit such a strong aura? With one strike, Jie Kang could defeat several weaklings, leaving them panicked. Jie Gallion had to resort to using her sword, as if it were her own thread, continuously attacking him. Its movement was incredibly agile, and for someone inexperienced in combat like Jie Kang, his body was covered in countless wounds. The range of her attacks was wide, and her speed was difficult to evade. Even his aura of darkness was blocked by her. He was struck with pain, not because he was weak, but because his opponent was too strong. She possessed the Fikin Kiem, a sword technique that allowed the user to freely move within the blades of the sword. She had also earned the title of Fifth Thong Ge Yu after mastering the techniques of this sword skill. Jie Kang had no choice but to flee, but where could he run? She directly chopped down 10 ancient trees, leaving him with no place to hide. She then began to close in. The difference in strength between them was evident. How could someone called a sword prodigy be defeated by someone like him? Speaking of martial arts, he knew one trick. Jie Kang remembered the Nat Dong Chai that had just been taught to him earlier. He concentrated his energy on the tips of his toes, then transferred it to his heels and through his knees, passing through his heart and to the tips of his fingers. He felt his body beginning to change as he cleared the blocked meridians. The streams of poison began to rush through his blood vessels, completely tearing apart his body. The donkey that Dan Ryung-kyung had passed down to him was like a full sail, created by manipulating the energy movement within his body and the poisonous streams that had been sealed within him for so long, flowing evenly with his internal energy. He began to focus on a point on his body. In other words, this was the upgrade of Nat Dong Chai. Suddenly, a shockwave hit. Fortunately, his bodyguard quickly used his body to block it, or else she would have died. Without a doubt, he immediately recognized Nat Dong Chai, carrying the venomous mouth and the soiled blood continuously. He advised his young lady to take the antidote before fighting. After she drank it, she was very confident that his poisonous beak couldn't do anything to her. She had no idea that it was actually the poison created by Mangio, disguised as an antidote. She continued to soil her blood without understanding what was happening. She immediately fainted, a symptom of poisoning. How could he spare those who wanted to kill him with just a moment ago? How could the bodyguard who was so terrifying just now be begging for mercy? At least he begged for mercy for his young lady. How could he spare those who wanted to kill him? While Jie Kang was about to intervene, he was stopped by Lao Jian. He promptly administered the antidote to him, deciding to depart, not wanting him to face danger because of him, nor the people who were not yet dead before. He was also kind enough to administer a bit of antidote to them, simply not wanting to be misunderstood by the villagers and the factions, none of whom he had harmed. Someone had taken advantage and placed all the blame on him. He quickly clarified that he was not the poisoner. She was the antidote when she used it before. They had obtained them from the League. That was all he could help them with. Jie Kang then left. That night, the League's assassin sneaked in to assassinate them. Luckily, the guards intercepted him in time. But his body was too weak from the poison, quickly defeated by the assassin. However, even in death, he tried his last strength to protect the young lady. At that moment, Jie Kang appeared behind him. Since when, no one knew. He immediately had to surrender, dropping his weapon, but he also didn't know information about the client. This time, only the mission: to assassinate the heir, Jie Gallion. Nevertheless, he would die if the mission failed, so he had to kill Jie Gallion at all costs. The aura was released very quickly, and she had to die. This made the bodyguard extremely painful, and exclaimed, "I have protected the young lady since she was 4 years old, like a servant of Jie Gallion. I see that as my duty. I gradually became familiar with others, even more than myself. Having someone to protect is more valuable than my own life." He decided to leave without revealing the cause of the attempted assassination of the young lady. All the blame would fall on him to find out the purpose of those who did this. Jie Kang also agreed with him, weighing him without needing to worry. Before leaving, he also reminded him to be careful and to survive. The mastermind behind everything is the leader of the League. He ruthlessly manipulated the lover of his disciple, causing immense pain when he saw her lifeless body. He did this to provoke Jie Gallion into action, fully intent on eliminating Jie Kang. The celestial and terrestrial ments were set, leaving old Jie Gallion bitter. How can his Jie Gallion survive, and how did Li Jung know? Mangio had a hand in the affairs in Unem by contacting Sikuan. The reason for killing Jie Gallion's daughter was to facilitate an alliance between his disciple and the sword master's disciple, the Eagle's Bone. Myung was furious, never expecting such cruelty from him, destroying what he had nurtured for so long. Lee Jung, the league leader, was even more despicable than him. Although enraged, he couldn't kill Mangio as he still had many uses. What Lee Jung wanted was to become the ruler of the world, giving the old man a dual throne. However, Mangio was not interested. All he wanted was Jae Kang. At this moment, Jae Kang felt the changes within his body since he used the precepts before. In the battle with Jae Galleon, something had shifted within him. He no longer felt extreme pain or resistance when manipulating his aura. He could harness the accumulated energy from 6 years, not just the flow of ki, but connecting with the flow within him, utilizing every part of his body's energy. This meant he could employ the secret techniques of the martial arts taught to him before. Deciding to head to Ho Wang via Sekuan, suddenly, a figure appeared, emitting a terrifying aura, rendering him immobile. He threw out Jae Mung's death sentence meant for him, advising him to prepare for hell, amplifying his despair. Jae Kang, of course, wasn't scared. What's there to fear? Death? Nah, not him. Jae Myung acted quicker than anticipated. This battle would differ significantly from the ones before. Instead of setting traps in advance, Jae Kang had to counter the enemy's tactics. He felt like a mouse in a cage. However, Jae Myung didn't immediately pursue him. Instead, he let Jae Kang come to Nanji village. There had to be a reason for sure. Jae Kang had to use this time to prepare for everything. Thanks to the cleared meridians, Jae Kang could now utilize the medicinal secrets passed down by Jae Sonji. They hadn't set up a big trap just to catch a small fish. They were aiming for the mastermind behind Jae Kang, helping him. She could easily discern that. While this was happening, a disciple of Baek Lee Jung also received a letter. Jae Kang was in Nanji village. Naturally, he wouldn't miss this opportunity for revenge for his lover. That day, while Jae Kang was walking, he was suddenly called to have his fortune read. The fortune teller was different from the usual people who followed him, so he first checked the hexagram. Surprisingly, the fortune teller revealed intelligence that the Jia Cat Bang was using celestial and terrestrial nets to trap him. They immediately went to a narrow alley where 2 trackers were swiftly taken care of. The fortune teller also revealed his affiliation with Dan Ryung Kyung, because everyone in the martial world believed he was from the minor dark sect, hence why they saved him. Whether they did or not, people would still view him as part of the minor dark sect. The Lord thought that instead of waiting for Jia Cat Bang to act, it was better to rescue him, and then investigate the enemy's intentions. Thus, they decided to help him escape while misleading Jia Cat Bang. They needed to act quickly. A massacre would soon sweep through the southern village. They surely wanted to exchange him for something significant, to incite a major disturbance, providing a pretext for war against the minor sects, under the instigation of the lead. Finally, Jae Sonji had no choice but to act and decided to level this village along with Hung Dakyong. There was a time when people always adhered to the spirit of martial arts, and justice always prevailed in Kangho. They would selflessly forget themselves to combat evil. But decades ago, after the martial arts alliance was established, and a person was elevated to the position of alliance master, everything changed. The current martial arts master, Haewol Jinin, focused on manipulating ideals and controlling Kai. The harmony that the factions had always strived to maintain now seemed threatened, rather than eradicating different thoughts and ideals. He seemed to be talking about something larger, but in reality, he was ingraining the New World Order's ideology, where justice became something easily sacrificed for greater benefits. Those once called righteous warriors and the major factions became twisted, starting to adhere to that ideology. Jae Kang's final decision was that he wouldn't leave to fight them. This time, he wouldn't run and leave the common people to suffer the consequences. This drove his uncle almost insane. "You're out of your mind, kid. Trying to take on the entire army alone is like seeking death. If I can't advise you, then you better leave." Quickly, Jae Galleon took action. Nanji village was completely sealed off. No one could escape. Following the orders issued, they began massacring the villagers mercilessly. Mistaken killings were even worse than omissions. Only the cries of innocent people were heard. Suddenly, explosions rang out one after another, confusing the attackers. Jae Kang had begun his move. A figure appeared on a high rooftop with a sickle meeting the grain, looking coldly at them, as if they were already dead. Jae Kang immediately shouted, "The gates of Nanji village are surrounded. If you want to live, evacuate to the outer wall. I've created an opening there. It's the only way I can help the villagers escape." Quickly, their soldiers rushed there, but luckily, members of the minor sects were able to rescue them in time. The deputy head of Gia Cat didn't want to pursue the commoners because doing so would label them as murderers. The previous explosions had attracted a lot of attention to this location,